I'm Ali Zendrian, Editor-in-Chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I find news gems that might not have gotten their full chance to sparkle, and I dust them off a little bit. Actually, we have a treat this week because Brandon found one of the items for me. My trusted co-host and personal financial advisor, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial. Brandon, how's your week been?
Week's been good. Beautiful, sunny Southern California. I've got out on both mountain bike and golf this week and got a good amount of work done. So it's been a productive week so far. Can't complain.
I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie. As you can see, I'm wearing a sweater, which is only mildly inappropriate today.
Okay. Is it pretty cool there in the New York area?
It was mid-60s, but this morning it was chilly.
Okay, that's like perfect football weather though. So,
having never played, I wouldn't know.
Fair. Or even tailgating, watching a football game. It just feels like fall weather, even from growing up on the East Coast. Like cool in the morning, but then warms up a little bit. You get some sun. So I don't mind that type of weather.
Good to know. So our first bit of news this week is Cerulli's Customized at Scale, a framework for next generation advisory platforms report, which was quite a mouthful. It showed that customization and tax management are big priorities for the majority of affluent investors, but given that only 47% of advisors offer tax planning services, generally speaking, and 53% of advisors will do so for a client with more than $5 million in investable assets. An additional finding of the report was that advisor-managed high net worth assets went up from 49% in the market in 2013, 66% in 2023. So Brandon, I would be curious your thoughts on all of that.
What I thought was funny was that second stat of 53% of advisors would consider doing some tax planning for clients that have over $5 million. Like, what, are you kidding? Like, what are we talking about? How is that not 100%? For one, how is it not closer to 100% for even not closer to 5 million? A lot of the data that I've seen, because I've seen data from Holistiplan and I think eMoney as well, that suggests it's actually closer to 25% that are doing tax planning. Now, of advisors. Now, likely there's probably just, if we have to define the word, likely the Cerulli study. Again, I'm not saying that their data is incorrect, and I'm a big fan of a lot of their work. Likely they're just referring more to portfolio. So are we tax loss harvesting? Are we using things like direct indexing? So taxes, but directly related to the portfolio. And my fancy feelings and maybe unpopular opinion, that's scratching the surface. For me, like if we're only talking about pre-tax versus after-tax, or if it's a brokerage account, have we considered tax loss harvesting? That's elementary tax planning is what that is. Very important. And I think more advisors absolutely need to do this, but I think likely that 25% number of advisors who are doing more tax planning or more advanced tax planning, where you're talking about business entity election, actually reviewing tax returns, maybe even using a tool like Holistiplan to help you in those types of categories. And obviously with me just passing all of my enrolled agent EA exams, very much into tax planning. So I really think advisors out there, if they don't go beyond just the basic service level portfolio stuff, I think eventually they're going to get more left in the dust, because now you're really overpaying for portfolio management if all you're getting is some service level tax planning and that's it. But again, those are just my fancy feelings.
We're fancy. So I hadn't even factored in what you were saying about how this could really just be focusing at like a tax loss harvesting kind of level, because I would agree with you if my advisor, and obviously in this case, my advisor is you, so I know that you're doing it. But if you're not doing tax loss harvesting at the end of the year, like, what are we doing? At the end of the day, then, like, I may as well just do it myself, and I don't know anything. Let's be honest. So that's one fancy feeling. The other one, though, so that's a difference of 6% of advisors will like budge for $5 million in investable assets. So first of all, Philip Hecker, shout out to him from Bento Engine, the CEO. He's pointed out that advisors who have large pools of money at their disposal will take care of those clients very well versus the downstream people like me. It was unfathomable that there was such a little difference, which to me, I guess, shows that advisors really hate tax planning because, dangle money in front of them and they still say, no, don't want to do it. Is that the case?
I mean, I could speculate multiple reasons. One reason is compliance. I mean, in all the disclosures that you see, typically it's, we can't offer legal and tax advice, which is really interesting that we all have to say that a lot of the time, but we're directly giving tax advice when we're suggesting, even if it's the elementary, which is the word that I used earlier, of pre-tax versus Roth, for example. that's tax advice to some degree. Now, again, is that math? Is it crazy? Is it saying, hey, you should write off these types of things, or we should look into cost segregation studies and all sorts of other jargon that I won't bore you with and the listeners with right now? No, it's not that level, but it is some level of tax advice. So I think some firms, their compliance are going to be very strict. Old firm that I had worked at couldn't really do any sort of written financial plan. So kind of tough to do tax planning if you're not able to write that down or even email that to a client. So I think that may be part of it. And I think others, advisors, like I've got a buddy, he's a CFP. He's like, I just refer everyone to the CPA. I don't like tax planning. It is not in my wheelhouse. And that's kind of his take on it. And I would assume a lot of other advisors just aren't as confident. And again, maybe this is, I took tax planning in college. I did tax returns my senior year of college too. So I have a little bit of, to not be arrogant, but a little bit above average tax knowledge, I think, especially now after passing some of these exams too. So I've always just loved it and really leaned into it because I could see the value that would be provided, but I could see a lot of folks in the industry, if they didn't have a similar background, trying to avoid it at all costs. Although all the data that we're seeing in both this study and a lot of others, clients want tax planning.
But so then to your point, because you said something interesting about passing it off to the CPA, and I kind of assumed that too, that this was part of the centers of influence that we were just establishing and saying there's an estate attorney and there's the CPA and there's you guys. So I could see that as being an answer. But do you think that the drive not to get further into tax planning is like the respect for this profession of there's a CPA who does this and I have to stay over here, so I'm not going to step on your toes?
Maybe that's part of it, but at least from my experience, I'm putting the client first. The client is my priority. I'm sitting on your side of the desk if we were to go meet with, say, your tax professional. And from my experience, now again, this is just limited. This is anecdotal. This isn't necessarily a global thing, although it seems to be more of a recurring theme from my conversations with my buddies. Oftentimes that tax professional, CPA, EA, et cetera, they're mostly doing the tax preparation. And oftentimes, again, this is my experience, I feel like they just think I'm a nuisance. And then I'm trying to tell them what to do, which is not at all what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes, just trying to make sure that everyone's aligned, because typically that tax professional is not coordinating with an estate planning attorney. They're not coordinating with the financial advisor. In fact, last year I had a client had a $30,500 contribution, just not input on the client's tax return. Fortunately, we reviewed that draft ahead of time and we were able to get it corrected, but just little things like that. And again, in that case, I didn't feel bad about quote unquote stepping on the CPA's toes. I'm like, this is my client and I want to save them $7,000 in taxes this year. They made this contribution. So we're going to make sure that we get this done right. Again, I said it much more tactfully than my fancy feelings are coming out right now, but maybe that's part of it. But for me, my care and loyalty to the client superseded the potential awkward conversation of a CPA getting a little bit upset that I'm just trying to coordinate the situation a little bit. And also is why I got the EA. So I can do less coordination, just keep it in-house.
Yes. Which is why in the future, my taxes will be coming to you. Thank you, sir.
Right. You're welcome. No problem. Yeah. Everything will get recorded. It's going to get done right. You know where to find me. You're going to get communications.
So the second piece of news is from Pontera. Actually, this is the bit of news that you brought to me, which was super exciting. Its latest data showed that 42% of retirement savers have more than $100,000 in retirement savings, and about 25% have less than $25,000 across both college savings and retirement plans. In the article, it was positing that macroeconomics is impacting this lack of savings, which I guess to a certain extent is understandable. The other thing that I think that you really latched onto was that only 27% of people surveyed felt confident and in control of managing their retirement and college savings. Brandon, since this came from you, feelings away.
I mean, no, that is exactly what stood out to me. And I love that they even brought up what I would refer to as the emotional jobs to be done. We've probably talked about that framework on the podcast before. If you're not familiar with it, go look it up. It's incredible. It's going to apply to any business and a lot of other areas of your life. But I think when it comes to money, we think oftentimes in just the dollars and the cents, but this is showing the feel statements, because we could have all the money in the world and still feel anxious about money. We could have no money and feel more inconfident and in control depending on the different circumstances and other things going on. But the fact that I just see all of this, and this is probably where the fancy feelings come out, all these influencers, some good, some not, saying never pay an advisor or never pay them a percentage fee because they're just going to take all your money over the long run. But then what they're not able to realize, since they're not in the industry and sometimes maybe even unwilling to hear this, is advisor or clients and investors feel oftentimes more confident. They'll end up saving more. They know that they've got a trusted person. If and when the market does decline, it's way easier to be able to, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to call Brandon, or I'm going to call my other CFP professional. I probably know what they're going to say. They're probably going to tell me to not sell all my money, and the market's not going to zero. Even if they know that before, sometimes just having that middleman, that one person in between that's going to lead with empathy and care for that client, to then be like, hey, here's how we reframe this, does help them feel more in control. Even if their investments, will say they get the exact same returns without an advisor, although a lot of data suggests that they don't. The average investor underperforms the average fund. So again, I think a lot of this is just working with an advisor. Yes, I very much have a bias in this. Clearly leads to all the data that we're seeing shows that your outcomes in the future are typically a bit better. And also in the present, you feel better right now, not just in 20, 30 years that you're planning for.
I was looking at it and I'm like, I'm not confident. I am in control of my retirement savings, but I also, have 25 years before I can retire. So, whatever, it is what it is. I don't feel confident because there are just so many unknowns in life, and you want to be prepared for as many of them as humanly possible. But I would just be curious why it seems like 100,000 is like this magic number.
I don't think it's a magic number, other than it just sounds really good. I mean, same thing from an income. Oh, I can't wait till I hit 6 figures. You can say, you can say that. I guess the magic to the 100,000 number, though, I guess now that I'm thinking about it again, is based on compounding. I think typically you're 50% of the way to, or 25% of the way to $1 million based on compounding, even though it's only 10% obviously of $1 million. I think the number's 25. Someone fact check me on that, but it's a higher percentage than the 10%. So once you start getting that critical mass, because again, that same 10% return on $100,000, that's $10,000. But then if it's on $500,000, that's $50,000. So the compound interest, that same percentage return, just results in a absolute dollar amount that is substantially higher. So you start to feel or see the effects of compound interest working in your favor a bit more. As close to the magic number speculation I can get is you start to feel it a little bit more. But I don't think it's a magic number in the sense of all of a sudden you're just more confident. Because to your point, we're talking about investments here, but there's also a lot of stuff behind the scenes for every single human being out there. So while their number might be fine, other life transitions happening, we own businesses. So our income can potentially fluctuate a bit more than the average person. One client leaves us and we might have been feeling confident, and now all of a sudden we're not feeling as confident and in control of our money, even though that has nothing to do with the investment side of things.
True. But now that I'm thinking about the numbers, I feel like then the study must have been conducted, I would presume, with people circa my age and younger, because I would hope that, if somebody's, I feel like I just have to get to 100,000 and you're 60, like, I mean, granted, I live in New York where things are highly expensive, and maybe I'm letting that cloud my judgment too much, but that doesn't sound like it's anywhere near enough.
Right. And again, that's also another issue. Every situation's different. Where, again, I used to live and work in West Virginia, where a lot of people, they're between their Social Security, maybe they got some level of pension, they might have been fine on even $100,000 or a couple $100,000 of excess, where that was almost the fun money. But of course, you and I, you just mentioned, live in higher cost of living areas, and things just keep getting more expensive for the younger generation. So I think our mindset on things does absolutely shift. So we're going to look at that through the lens of, right, I mean, for you or I, is $100,000 going to be enough to retire? No, not even close, unless we've got, some sort of crazy pension or something like that. But for our generation, right, it's going to need to be a lot more. That said, women with advisors, 55%, report at least $100,000 saved, nearly double the share of women without advisors, which was 29%.
Yeah, that is pretty telling. And it does then make you feel like whether it's the confidence in it, whether it's that emotional job, like you were saying, or whether it's, I know that there's somebody competent who's managing my finances versus me feeling unsure. And sadly, for whatever reason, it feels like women feel more unsure about those things, whether it's that you were horrible at math that you were taught when you were in 6th grade or whatever. But yeah. What did you make of that?
Again, I think this goes back to working with an advisor. Typically, you're going to feel more confident. I think, especially if you work with a quality advisor who's doing more than just the investments and more than just the service level tax planning to potentially bring this full circle. But yeah, I think there could be some bias. People who have advisors sometimes may have a bit more money in general, think that they need to have something like that. But I mean, the fact that women with advisors had a pretty substantial amount more saved, I think is pretty telling. It's similar to if you have a personal trainer, that's not going to be the magic bullet, so to speak, but you're probably more likely to show up to your workouts if you have a personal trainer or you have a group class. So I think it's a lot of these psychological and emotional benefits of, if I'm working with an advisor, I'm more likely to not make bad decisions from an investment perspective. I'm also more likely to save more consistently as well. So I think there's just all sorts of emotional and psychological factors that go into working with an advisor. And it's not just getting a better investment return. Although, again, the data suggests that just not making bad decisions with your investments will lead to, of course, higher returns that advisors help you get sometimes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention, and I'm glad that we got to talk about it. Yeah. Our third bit of news is related to financial literacy. So Communify, which provides AI, digital, and data solutions for the financial industry, is expanding its Mind AI stories with robust client data, according to the press release. The Communify stories, again, according to the press release, translates complex data into clear and actionable narratives to create more clear communication that's easier to understand around finances. So when I saw this anyway, we're both proponents of increasing financial literacy, basically, however it makes sense. I appreciated the fact that we were working in more like storytelling and narrative, because I think that those stick more with people than just flat out numbers. But I would be curious what you thought.
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I want to spin this back to you. I want to get your feelings first, or thoughts on this one, because I feel like I've done way too much talking. I've had way too many fancy feelings on this podcast. So I'm gonna send it back to you, and then I'll share some of my thoughts.
My feelings aren't that fancy, but I think I appreciate the fact that we're working on financial literacy and acknowledging the fact that it's horrible and that there's no reason that it should be that way. But B, as I mentioned, so I think the fact that we're focusing on stories, you read an article, just the stats themselves, even though, as you'll see and hear from the information that I shared, obviously those stick out to me. But the thing that really, really sticks with me is going to be the story of Johnny lost all of his money for XYZ reason, and now he has no retirement savings. But you remember that because it sticks with you. There's some level of empathy or putting yourself in the other person's shoes to a certain extent. So I think that that's super helpful, and I'm glad that that's being utilized. Back over to you, sir.
Yeah. All right. I agree. I mean, everything that I've seen suggests stories in general, and even looking back anecdotally to your point, we just remember them so much better. So instead of making it just cut and dry, being able to tell stories, I think that's going to help a lot of folks. I think it was a podcast a while back, but I think there was going to be a Bitcoin or crypto show for kids. So obviously that's right. All storytelling. They're hopefully going to be able to retain some good things from that. Yeah, I think the storytelling is important. And even interesting when you mentioned, like I was pulling out numbers, and because you're able to remember, and we talk a lot about percentages on this. I think the reason is these numbers are telling a story. It's not just 55% of women advisors feel more confident or have more money if they're working with an advisor. Well, if that context or that story, if you will, is what even makes that number relevant. If it's just 55%, okay, well, what does that mean? Or even I've got my Element shirt on, like these numbers by themselves with no context mean nothing. Who cares what your liquid term score is until you realize, my liquid term score is 0.5. Therefore, if I don't have any income coming in, I could survive for 6 months. Oh, now it's relevant. So now it's how do we use numbers to tell that story? Because then the numbers actually mean something.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's taking those concepts and breaking them down so that it's not just, like you said, before all the jargon, and I don't even understand those few things that you said. So thank you for not going on that tangent, but getting into these complex circumstances instead of saying like, well, if you choose this path, you'll have less to pay in taxes. Okay, cool. Absolutely. That either makes sense or doesn't make sense. I'm glad that we're breaking things down to the granular level.
And I call it math with a purpose, because even growing up, if I can admit, wasn't a huge fan of math, which I know sounds crazy being someone who's in the financial planning space. But I think the problem was I didn't care about solving for X. X to me meant nothing. But now if I'm solving for X, if you will, and it means it's going to save you $7,000 in taxes, or you're going to be able to live on your current assets for over a year, even in a worst case scenario, again, now that means something. Now we can have a meaningful conversation around the numbers. It's just almost a kicking off point, but then we can get into what's truly important, how someone wants to live their life, what their values are, what their goals are, but we still need the numbers to help back up that conversation. But again, it's not because the numbers by themselves, it's the numbers in context. And again, if you can add storytelling to it as well, even more.
Absolutely. So this last bit of news this week, as I was chatting with Brandon before we hit record, I was curious if he was like, what the hell, like, Allie, why is this in here? This comes from e.l.f. Beauty, if you can believe it. So there was a point in me sending this to you. It's Change the Board Game, which by itself was just a super interesting name. So good job to you guys. It has more than 70 leaders and 20 organizations supporting its efforts to create more accessible and inclusive boardrooms. As part of of its services, it has board readiness and preparedness programs in addition to its advocacy. So I thought that this was important. I know for some people, it seems like a board is a stuffy group of people who, are just available and, seem to collect dust. But really, they can affect so much change into companies and overall into society. So I appreciate the fact that we're being thoughtful in how we're doing this and that these guys at e.l.f. Beauty are making a difference.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Ellie, there probably are some boardrooms that are mostly just collecting dust and not doing a ton, to your point. But when it's a good board, they absolutely are implementing a lot of change throughout the different companies and making sure that the vision is being carried on. And hopefully good boards are also making sure that, I think we've talked about this in the last several weeks too, that not only is the business winning, the employees are winning, but then also the customers. So you get that trifecta of a win across the board, which again, obviously, boards have a very big say in that. So I think it's great. I think that the key is the accessibility piece, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to potentially get to the table and have the chance to rise up the ranks of their particular companies, especially when they're crushing it in their respective roles and their voices absolutely do need to be heard because they've done a great job for the company already. They've probably got very unique insights that might be different than, if we always keep the board looking one exact way, well, we're probably going to get similar type of answers. But if we can increase the accessibility, then some diversity of thought as well and different experiences, I think can be a good thing.
And like you said, it's a win across the board, but I'm ching.
Nice. I like it. Not intentional, but I'm glad you called that out.
Oh, thanks. I could have sworn that it was, but good to know that was just accidentally cool.
No, that was just you calling it out. I like it.
Thank you. Anyway, thank you for another fabulous week and even letting me throw cosmetic stories at you. I appreciate you being along for the ride.
Hey, I'm ready for anything. Throw cosmetics, throw whatever, and I'll do my best. I won't always have an answer, but I always like the articles you find, and it's cool that we even have the diversity on this podcast where we're not just throwing facts and figures all day long. We got some fun stories to tell too.
Yeah, I try. Thanks, Brandon.
Yep. Thanks, Allie.